As you would know, what we're looking at here is a CV boot that covers the CV joint on the inside and outside of your front axle. They will tear and they will go, and most of the time you throw your complete axle assembly away, buy a new one for $80 or $100, put it in, and you're on your way. However, they do sell new boots to put on over the old ones. Now, if the axle hasn't been exposed too long, and if this hasn't been open too long, you might be able to, get another year, 2, 3 out of the front axle if you put a boot on and covered it up. The boot keeps the grease from getting dirt in it and gravel, dust off the road, water off the road, because as soon as that washes out of the knuckle inside your CV joint, it becomes dry and then wears out, and you have trouble. So what we're going to look at on this video is called a quick boot. There's different types of boot. The one that I'm going to show you is the two-piece boot, and it sells for around little over $20, and it hadn't got really great reviews. However, I decided to give it a try, and I'd really pay close attention to the instructions, because when you're working on something like this and trying to put a new boot on an old one, your hands will get greasy really fast because everything is covered in the old grease that's been thrown around for the last few months. And so I wash my hands about 4 or 5 times doing this job so that my hands are always clean. Because if you get grease anywhere on that two-piece component, it's not going to stick and it will come apart on you. The instructions don't say to remove the strut, but I took the bolts out. There's just 2 bolts. There's one here, and I swung it to the side. That way it allowed me more room to get in here and work to change the old boot. It just is the way I chose to do it. It's just seconds to take off. If you have a big bar or even an air gun, is a little better. Before you start, get a good brush, some solvent, and just clean all around so that when you put your arms in there or you're sliding in the new boot, you're not going to be hitting really greasy areas. This was quite badly built up with old grease and dirt and things like that. So clean it off good. You can follow up with some kind of cleaner, brake cleaner. This here is the old boot on the car that I'm replacing. I've got one area cut here, and I'm pulling it with the pliers to take it off. So you have, on each boot, you have one clamp at the back, it's a metal clamp, and you have a metal clamp at the front. New clamps are supplied with the new boot. Once you remove the clamps, take an X-Acto knife or some kind of sharp knife and slice the old boot all the way across and then pull it out of the way. I went in there, this is brake cleaner that I'm using, and I sprayed and washed this really clean. Make sure you spray the edges, make sure you get underneath, take clean rags and wipe it down. As you can see, this is spotless. I went in and I put new grease. I packed new grease because the old grease had been, being thrown out. And everything's assembled on the car. The only thing I took off was the tire. You can see this here is the brake rotor. And it's still attached to the car. So I grabbed the new grease and I just kept forcing it in and packing it in with my fingers. And, I put the car in neutral, turned it, packed it, and made sure that this was super clean. You do not want grease on this, because when you put the new boot on, if it's slippery, it's going to want to slide off. That's just common sense. This is what the two-piece quick boot looks like. It's imperative that you wait 1 hour minimum for it to dry. Now, the way this goes on is the one side climbs over the other. practice until you are really certain of how this clicks together. So I went in the house, I sat down, and I took this thing apart, about 10 times, clicked it back together until I knew exactly how it went, because when you put the glue on, the less time you spend taking it off and on, the better seal you're going to get. So you want to try to do this in 1 or 2 tries at the most. You have a little problem right in the middle there, but if you study how it goes together, it will click together. If you look at the top here, just about where that arrow is, it was that much too long for my application. So I took some heavy scissors and I just cut all the way around and cut that off. But you can measure that before or after, it doesn't matter. What I did is I tried it on the car and I saw that it wasn't a tight fit. So the more you pull this on, it's cone shaped, the tighter it gets. So there's tabs right on the end at the top that you can pull by to get it on the car. Then if it's not really tight on the first groove, and maybe you're working on a bigger vehicle than I had, I cut that off. That's probably 3/4 of an inch, and then this became the area that I clamped. So what I did is I put the sealant, the weld material that they give you, on both sides. I ran it down, and then I clicked it together, and I walked away. I put it down, I walked away for 1 hour. The longer it sits, the tighter it will weld. So don't cut the time. What's just so huge on this is you cannot get any grease in here. If you go in the house after you've taken it apart and you sit down and you're putting it off and on, and if you got any amount of grease on your thumb or your fingers or your hand, it can make its way into here and it's not going to seal. When it comes apart, it won't be the boot's fault, it's going to be because of grease. So be ready to wash your hands. What I found out is this is not a time saver. It probably took me twice as long to do this application as to change out an axle. But I wanted to know how to do it. I wanted to give this application a try. And also the CV joint in the car was really good shape. There was absolutely no play. It was really tight. And so with a little bit of grease, I know it's going to last the person another, couple of years at least. And so I made sure that everything was really clean. And if you do the same thing, you're going to have good results. I lubed up the edge in that last picture. That was the second half after the hour. I slid it over the CV axle here. I clicked it together, and remember, leave it for a minimum of 1 hour on the second time. So you did the first one in the house, you left it an hour, you did not disturb it. You came outside, you put your glue on both edges, and then you slipped it over the shaft, watching not to get any dirt or grease on the edge. Click it together. You know now how it's going to go because you practiced until you were confident. Put it on, slide it out of the road, and just let it rest there, and that'll give that piece a chance. Here are those tabs I was telling you about to pull it onto the CV joint when you're ready. There is a 2-piece part that plugs the back of this CV boot. That only requires about 15 minutes of time. So what I did is I assembled it, and then I just poured the glue on it, turned it over and poured it on some more. Let it set up. There's a collar that goes over it, over that piece I just showed you in this last picture. On here there's a collar. That's the next step. I put the collar on. I glued the collar together